Shaping Success with Wes Tankersley is brought to you by Aggressive Marketing Solutions, your solution for all business social media needs. If you need a team of social media marketers and content creators to help you build your brand on social media, text WES 2020 to 541-709-6502 today. Get started building your brand on social media. Success is defined differently by every individual. Some have never even considered what it is. I hope when I get older I'll be successful. What does that even mean? Money? Cars? Big house? On this show, we strive to look at it a little deeper, learning from successful individuals on what they believe success really is and how to obtain it. Everybody, enjoy the show. This is Shaping Success with Wes Tankersley.
Hello and welcome to Shaping Success with your host, Wes Tankersley. That's me. I'm a former high school former high school teacher or baseball coach turned motivational speaker. And today I want to take the time to welcome our guest, Jeremy Schlater, aka Big J, who is a radio host at 100.3 The X radio station here in Boise. Today we're going to talk to him about who he is, his mindset, and how it played into how he shapes his success. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Big J. What's happening?
Wes, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. This is really cool, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to actually get to talk to you face-to-face, kind of. I've been listening to you for a long time, so it's, I think you said that you actually started working at the radio station when I graduated high school, but I'm pretty sure I started listening to you right about at the same time, so.
Yeah, 1999 is when I started working here at the X. So yeah, about 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So speaking of that, I know quite a bit about you, but just from listening to you for 20 years here. But I would like to our podcast is about success and how people shape that or decide what that is for each person. And we like to start a little bit with like getting to know you a little bit. So can you tell me a little bit more about not just the Big J on the radio, but, kind of where you grew up, all the things that you went through, and what led you to the career that you chose and where you're at now?
Yeah, for sure, man. I grew up in Montana, small town in eastern Montana called Miles City. And my mom and dad, my dad was a truck driver. My mom worked at a bank. And as the years went on, my dad would do heavy haul stuff, and he would be gone a lot. And it turned out he ended up being in the area here in the Boise, Idaho area a lot. I had two older sisters. Both had graduated from college to become CPAs, and one of them lived here in Boise. So it was a natural idea for the family to move here to Boise. And so when I was 12, we moved here to Boise, Idaho. And then I started going to middle school and high school here at a small Christian high school called Valley Christian High School. That's where I graduated from. It's now called Coal Valley. But that's where I spent my high school years. And when I was in high school, I actually really wanted to work in politics. That was my passion at the time. And so when I graduated from high school, my plan was to go into college and get a poli-science degree. But I was a terrible student. So I'm like, listen, I need to take a break from college and just work in the industry. That was my plan. So I did. I worked for a senator for a brief period of time during a re-election campaign and for one of the state parties, the Idaho Republican Party. And it didn't take long for me to realize this is not what I want to do with my life. And it was kind of soul crushing because, all through high school, you set up and you have these ideas of what you want to do and you're very idealistic. And it just, it was not an industry I didn't see a lot of happiness coming from. And it probably was correct in that assumption. So there was a brief period there where I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I kind of wandered. And that's when I decided, I should probably go to college. My family really wanted me to at least get a little bit of education after high school. And I felt I owed it to them because, private high school is not cheap. So I thought I'll give it a shot. I wanted to major in mass communications and journalism. Specifically, I wanted to be a public relationist. I thought that would be something that was cool. I enjoy talking to people, so that was the plan. While that was happening, I started going to my comm class, and I met this gentleman named Bill, and he was Bill Carrico from Bill and Doug on the X's morning show. And, if you listen to radio at all here in the Treasure Valley, you knew who he was because he had been on the air for a long time. And we had a mutual friend. And so I became friends with him, and we started spending some time together. And that's when I started really listening to their morning show. And basically how I ended up getting into the whole radio thing is while I was going to mass communication journalism, I never really had considered radio as a career or even something I really wanted to do. Looking back on it now, there was a lot of forces at work that were pulling me towards radio. One of the people I really admired when I was growing up, and I did a lot of listening to sports radio. So I was a huge clone. I love Jim Rome and the guys here in the Treasure Valley. Idaho Sports Talk, so Jeff Caves and Mike Prater, I listen to those guys all the time. So I was a big sports fan, but I never really considered a career in radio. So it's not something like I bugged Bill about. But while I was listening to their morning show, I thought it was hilarious. And I started taking part in calling their show unbeknownst to them. And I worked at Avis Rent-A-Car full time. So I happened to be able to be in a position where all I would do is sit in a van down by the river and listen to their show. And I would have free time to call in and mess with them. And so I did that for a long time. And I don't really think they knew that it was me. And one morning I go on this ridiculous rant because they'd been talking about the weather and how it was freezing out. But I know that they're in a studio. And so I just go on this rant and they stop me and they're like, "Hey, is this Jeremy? Is this the guy I go to school with?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, would you consider maybe coming in and doing the sports on a Monday to wrap up the weekend? And I was like, okay. And so they invited me to come in and kind of see how the show works and decide if it would be something that would work out. So I'm like, sure. So I went down to the studio and met up with them and met Doug and watched them do a show. And I was like, yeah, I would love to help out. And so that weekend I watched all the football, college, and NFL because it was in September. And what happened is I come in Monday and, because I was never been on the radio before, we didn't do it live. We recorded it, the bit. But I had some sports scores in there, and I made a sports joke. It was a gambling joke. And so immediately those guys jumped on the fact that I was a gambler and I had a gambling problem. Like it went from 0 to 100 like that. And so I was offended by that, and I reacted. And that right there created Big J. And it was one of those things where it just seemed like the chemistry there was working, and I ended up becoming their stunt guy, going out and doing stuff. I worked with them for free. It was kind of a volunteer thing. And yeah, we did sports for a little bit, but that went away as soon as we started doing these stunt things. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door for radio. And then, the rest is a little more lengthy of a story, but it is important in talking about how to become successful in what you want to achieve, because I think as we get here to define success, achieving your goal is success. And what happened to me was I realized I wanted to work in radio. This is what I wanted to do. I found it. And so I decided, what do I need to make that happen? And those are the things that I started working on with Bill and Doug while I was doing that, to be able to kind of work my way in and get a full-time job.
And that's what I think is really cool about the way that you did that, because I don't think that people really realize the fact that you can get what you want. You don't necessarily have to go to school to do that. You don't have to do, you don't have to have all this training. You just basically have to hone your skills and figure out what that is. And so I applaud you because you went in there, you basically made it happen on your own. And when I started listening to you, when I started hearing you on there, I'm sure you were sitting in that van, because it was just like this guy in the background screaming. And at first you're kind of like, man, this guy's a little annoying. But then you start listening to it and you realize it's like comic relief. And then next thing you know, I hear you every single day. And it's like, when's Big J going to come in there and just like shake things up? Because it was crazy.
Well, here's the background to that, though. And this is the funny part, is I was monumentally naive. Like I went to a very Christian high school, so I had a good deal of faith that I was going in on. But so I was I was kind of sheltered in life. Music, by the way, wasn't something that I was huge into at the time, even really. So the idea of me just I was a big slab of like rock that could get chiseled out, and you could, that's what those guys did, and it was kind of, I don't know if it was intentional on their part or not, but so I was really naive, and most of my reactions and things were absolutely the truth coming from me because I didn't get the scope of what we were doing. I didn't get
Yeah.
radio. That show, Bill and Doug, by the way, way before its time. I mean, that was sketch comedy on the radio, and nobody was really doing that. And nobody's really done it right, I don't think, since then. So there was just this where, they would set up these situations just to get that reaction from me. And it was, we would have a good time. We had fun. We laughed about it. And sometimes I think they felt bad about it because I was really just like this genuine naive kid, but it worked out in the end, and so that helped me fall in love with radio. But the interesting thing about that is while that was going on, and I was like, okay, I want to do this. How do I do this? And looking back as we talk about this defining success, I don't know if I had written down these rules on how to do it. It kind of came natural, but I realized early on that you need to do a few things, and one of those was be available. Making yourself available to do stuff around the station was really important. And I didn't get hired right away. I did a lot of hanging out at the radio station. In fact, just recently, I was with one of the guys who were instrumental in hiring me, Jason Jack, was the program director at the time. And he was like, I would just sit around the radio station to kind of hang out. And it's true. I would really spend a lot of time just hanging out. And I would say I'm just waiting for Bill and Doug, but really it was just me kind of hanging out, being a part of the, I guess, the furniture. You know what I mean? People got used to seeing me there. And that took notice. Either I was being a weirdo or, I was really interested in what was going on. And so Jason and the office man, go ahead.
I think that's a big thing because you look at like some of these success people, like you look at like Bill Gates. That's how he did what he did. He didn't just get good just by showing up. The guy went and he worked in a computer lab when no one else was doing it, and that's what it is. He's around it. So once you figure out that that's what you want to surround yourself with that so that you can make yourself successful.
Yeah, and I mean, the ops manager and then Jason, they offered me an opportunity to work at the radio station behind the scenes. I wasn't getting paid to be on with Bill and Doug, and so they were like, well, you're kind of talented. If you really want to do this, let's get you hired to do something around the radio station. So they hired me to work the soundboards on the weekends. Remote board operator is what it's called. We had 4 stations, and during the weekends you'd have to come in and just make sure that all the breaks played the way they were supposed to, that sort of thing. But once I get my foot in the door in that way, that was when I'm like, listen, this is what I need to learn how to do. And I started to realize that being able to adapt and learn new technologies was super important. Also, along with that available part, is being invaluable. That's really what set the table for me, is learning how to do everything possible I could, from programming to whatever it was. That being invaluable to the people that were making the decisions was really important to me. And so I was just a sponge. I just learned everything I could, from production, commercial production, imaging production, setting up music schedules, those sort of things. I was always there to learn. And, I don't know if it would necessarily be able to happen these days with the corporate structures that are out there, but, I would work. I would come in and work for free. More hours than I was supposed to, just because I wanted to be in that environment and learn how to do that stuff. And I think, when we talk about setting goals, you have sub goals too, and things that you can celebrate achievements in. And one of those was, I remember Dan, our operations manager, coming to me, and he's like, listen, we just had our budget meetings, and we forecast for you 20 hours a week for the year. And I was like, oh my God, that was a huge deal to me, because I understood what that meant, that they really wanted me to be there, and they were separating hours and money, allocating it just for me. That was a big success right there.
Yeah, that is, I think that's a great opportunity that you created by yourself. I mean, I know that obviously you met Bill and you did that, but you kind of got yourself in there, which kind of moved you a little bit forward because Bill and Doug kind of petered out a little bit after that. And then next thing we know, it's you and Bill, right? Doug's gone. You're part of the morning show, correct? Is that where it kind of went from there?
You're breaking up a little bit there.
Well, so what I was saying was right after that, like you worked yourself into that position, and the next thing you know, you are part of the morning show. You are one of the hosts, right? Bill and you became the host of the morning show, and Doug was gone.
Well, I mean, it didn't quite happen necessarily that way. I think there was some decisions at the top of the food chain, and they wanted to split up that, trying to reach a demographic number, which was at the time 25 to 55, and it wasn't working as necessarily as well as they'd hoped. So yeah, they moved Doug over to J105, and so yeah, it was me and Bill and another host named Melissa Paul, who was former Miss Idaho. And so we did work together for a little bit after that. And then, just things happen and changes get made. And not soon after that, they decided they wanted to bring in a syndicated show to do mornings. That was a huge mistake. I think everybody can agree on that. And but meanwhile, while that's happening, so I'm working weekends doing the weekend show. That was kind of the big first step before we got into doing a regular show, and I would do several other day parts eventually. But before we even got to that point, I realized that this is what I was going to do, that we're coming upon a precipice where my time was becoming very difficult to manage because trying to work at the station, working a full-time job at Avis, and then going to college, it just wasn't working out. So I made a really tough decision, and I decided, you know what, college gone, and then I quit my job. I quit my full-time job, and I was only getting 20 hours a week at the radio station. That's the kind of sacrifice sometimes you have to make if you want to really go for it. And I decided and made a conscious effort. I'm like, I'm going to put all my chips in, and I'm going to go for it. It horrified my family, I think. And I was really lucky because they understood and they were there to support me a little bit financially here and there when I needed it. But you had to put all your chips in, and I did that. And so when that started to happen, that's when work really started to take shape. And I went from doing weekends to middays, and then middays to nights. And then I did the morning show stint for a little bit with Melissa and Bill, and then ended up being the afternoon jock. So it's kind of how that trail. And then along with that, though, the behind the scenes stuff away from being on air was really where I was working towards, because being on air and being, the host of a morning show, that's probably the pinnacle when it comes to, making some money. But, if you, being observant is really important too when you're trying to achieve success. And I could see a lot of people coming in throughout the door, talent-wise, whether they were going to other markets or they were things weren't working out and they were getting let go. There's a lot of budget trimming too. There were some rough times there in the middle 2000s with the recession and the housing bubble that burst. So I realized if I wanted to keep working, I needed to learn the behind the scenes part of running a radio station and programming the station. And so I was really setting my goal then to also be the music producer or the music director. That's somebody who helps out the program director. So working my way up to one day being a program director is what I was really trying to do. And I had a chance to intern and do that a couple times, though I never really got hired to do that. I'm pretty okay with that because things have worked out good. And maybe one day that'll still happen, but those were important parts of really shaping that success and getting to where we're at here now. And myself and Nick have been doing the morning after here for almost 13 years together. So.
Yeah, and so that's, and I love the fact that it started where it did, and it's not ended yet, and there's so much more to go with it. It feels to me like that's, to me, you found your niche, you found where you wanted to be, and you pushed yourself into it by trying to develop all the knowledge that you knew that you needed. And so that's going to go far. One of the things that I really like to talk about is like your mindset through that. And I know we've hit on it a little bit, but we're talking about positive mindset and how that got you where you're at. Cause it's a pretty big deal that a person who sits there and thinks about all the negative things that are happening is never going to end up in this situation. You could have very well walked in there, called in a few, just gave up because you didn't get what you were looking for, but you continued to push through that, through all the bad stuff that happened, because everything's not always good, but just staying the course. Can you talk a little bit about what your mindset was through that whole situation?
Yeah, totally. You're absolutely right about that too. And I think the important part about it is you have to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to believe in you. Nobody else is going to want to follow you. So, you have to, that's the first key, is you have to continually remind yourself that you are capable of achieving this. And so the belief in yourself is the important part about that. And it's not, it's not something that happens necessarily every day, but sure, there are some setbacks, but you keep pushing forward. And you know what? Here's the thing: you will have setbacks. It's just the way it is. There were a couple times in particular when, they came and they had to cut my hours. In fact, my boss was like, "Do you have a tape and resume?" And I'm like, "Oh man, what are you asking me that for?" He's like, "Well, they're going to cut your hours back." And so he assumed that I would quit and be upset about that and then try to move along down the line. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's, I think I'm going to, stick through this because I've built something here and I don't want to abandon it. So, you have to persevere through some of those times and just keep forging ahead, even though it looks like there might be some setback, because you've got to have that belief in yourself and know that, you just keep working. People see the hard work. And that's really important. And that's something I've always believed. You work hard, you make yourself invaluable, then there's going to be a place for you where you work. And that was pretty much some of the basics, essentials of how I've managed to stay here for 20 years.
Yeah. And so you've been there the longest out of anyone, correct? 20 years, or is there anyone that's been there longer than you?
Yeah, there's a few people, not necessarily on the X, but we have here at Lotus, we have 4 other radio stations, and there's some people, some salespeople, and some administrative people who've been here, 24, 25 years. So it's kind of like a small fraternity of us who kind of came in at the same time. But yeah, there are some other people that have been around that long. But on the station, on air, it's pretty much been, I'm kind of the guy that's been around the longest, for sure.
Okay. I kind of have one other question too about that. Like, so you're talking about like failing and things like that and dealing with criticism. How do you deal with criticism? Because I know that there's people out there who, whatever, how do you deal with that? I mean, you're kind of this big public figure that probably does get a lot of criticism.
Well, you have to have thin skin. I mean, because it's one of those things where, yeah, especially working on air, being an on-air personality, you're going to have those moments where people don't necessarily like what you have to say. Maybe they don't even like your voice. So yeah, there's several people out there who've, not liked what I do, and it's just like there's nothing I can do about that. Thankfully, there's probably more people who do like it. But in those things, it is about having thin skin and not paying attention to that noise and just continuing to do what you do. And sure, sometimes there are moments where it can really bum you out, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, everybody wants to be liked, especially when you're in radio, but the reality that some people don't like you is something you should walk into it with, because otherwise it's going to be a harsh reality when you find out. And especially now with technology, with social media, you can text the station whenever you want. I mean, if somebody wants to criticize you, it's pretty easy to see that now, whereas it might not have been 15 years ago. But you just got to take it with a grain of salt and keep going,
So that's a good thing, is it doesn't deter you from doing what you want. It doesn't deter you from being successful because you're willing to just kind of let that go. I think that's a big thing that a lot of people can't deal with, is the fact that someone's going to criticize them when they're trying to reach their goal. And that's awesome that you can just see through that. And I think that's what a lot of people need to see. last question here. This is kind of, what it's about. We're talking about shaping success here. Kind of for me, I think we talked a little bit on the phone about it a couple days ago, is the fact that I think that people's success is reliant on what they deem that is, what makes them happy. They could be working at McDonald's for $5 an hour, which is probably not $5 an hour now anymore, and that could make them happy, and that's what their success is. So can you tell me what your success is? How do you shape or define your success?
Yeah, I think right now I define success is still being here, still being relevant, and still working hard towards the goals. I mean, we on a month-to-month basis have goals here at the station. Whether it be the morning show, we want to be the number one morning show, men 25-54 always. Now it doesn't always happen in that way. We've done it 3 or 4 times, and then number 2, those sort of things. So you can shape it that way. And I think that being successful again is achieving your goals. And so you don't just stop making goals, you keep adding goals to it. And I think that's an important thing. And even when you're trying to achieve, maybe it's a demographic that you want to be number one in radio, there are things you have to do to get there. And so reevaluating those goals is always important. And I think that's keeping moving forward, I think, and achieving is the best way to gain that success.
So never being complacent, never being, you're happy with it, but always wanting to improve. That's especially in radio right now. I mean, there is no room for complacency. Trying to find a way to get people to listen to your radio station through social media, all kinds of different avenues is super important. Pushing the boundaries of what is possible, and streaming, podcasts, all those things are important factors in being successful in radio, and we need to find a way to maximize those things. So, continuing to work to push that edge is really important. Well, that's awesome. I think that's really what it is. It's about forming those goals, going through there, making sure no matter what you're doing, whether it's radio or anything that you're doing in life, you have to set those goals and achieve them more so that you can continue getting better every single day. With that being said, I think one of the things that we like to talk about is, I know you're on the radio. I find you on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. I follow you everywhere. Where else are you? What else are you doing that's kind of technology wise, so we can find you wherever we want to find you besides the radio?
Let's see, Twitter is where I do a lot of work stuff via Twitter, and then Instagram. It gets tough because we don't have necessarily social media managers here. So myself and Nick and the rest of the staff kind of do the station social media. So that's a priority. That's important. So I don't get a chance to do a lot of the personal social media that I might like because I'm busy doing that other stuff. And after a while, it just kind of gets tiring. But yeah, Facebook, I do a lot of stuff on Facebook. I created a personality page a couple years ago, and that's been a lot of fun, though I don't get too busy on there. I started doing a little bit of TikTok here and there. So might focus a little bit on that in the future here. And then YouTube. On occasion, I like to stream, cast gaming on Twitch and YouTube, and Facebook gaming is something that I'm looking at doing in the future, where playing games and streaming. That's a big thing these days, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing that, but I don't get a chance to do it as much as I really want to.
That's great. Well, I hope that everyone will follow you. That'll help out a little bit with following. I just want to say thank you for taking the time. I think I messaged you probably a week and a half ago, and I was just hoping that you'd say yes, and it was like pretty much instant. You're like, yeah, let's do it. And so I really appreciate you taking the time, because I know you're busy. You're always on the radio. You're always somewhere. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. I think it's really cool what you've been doing, and I hope you get that interview with Hunter Pence. I hope that happens.
It's a dream. It'll happen. I know it will. It's one of those things where you just got to set out and try.
I believe in you. So you're going to make it happen.
Well, I appreciate it. So I want to just tell everyone, thank you for listening. My challenge to you is to try and find the shape of your success, and I hope you have a great weekend.
This was Shaping Success with Wes Tankersley, brought to you by Aggressive Marketing Solutions. If you need a team of marketers to help you with social media, all you need to do to start is text Wes 2020 to 541-709-6502. 541-709-6502. That is Aggressive Marketing Solutions. Have a great day. See you next time.